Welcome to Book Spectrum. I'm your host, Chris Cordani. On Book Spectrum, we introduce you to an array of books created by first-time and long-time authors, many from outside the normal writing track and all across the, as we say, spectrum. This episode, Dr. Kevin Schewe is back. He was our first interview on Book Spectrum with his book, Bad Love Strikes. He has a sequel, Bad Love Tigers. It's another sci-fi time travel thriller. We see the Bad Love Gang travel back again for a new adventure, one that takes them to the other side of the globe. Welcome to Book Spectrum, Kevin.
Chris, it's just great to be back with you. It seems like yesterday that you and I were talking about Bad Love Strike.
It might have been. I lost a lot of time with all those shutdowns. I don't even know what day it is. I'm sure a lot of our listeners don't either. But thanks to the shutdowns, you managed to get this book done a lot faster than you thought.
Oh my gosh, Chris! If you'll recall, my day job, I'm a cancer specialist. I'm a board-certified radiation oncologist. I take care of all types of adult cancers, and so we didn't shut down for COVID-19. Because cancer is a life-threatening illness, and so we're really frontline workers. Treating cancer day in and day out, but a lot of elective things got put off or basically tabled for about 8 weeks. And during that time, I kind of self-quarantined. I mean, I went to work, took care of the cancer patients, and I went home and wrote. And then I went to work, and I went home and wrote. And so it turned out that COVID-19, in a way, was a blessing in terms of me being a new book author, because during that 8 weeks, I really wrote the bulk of Bad Love Tigers, the first sequel that we're visiting about today.
Bad Love Tigers, Kevin, takes us back to the end of Bad Love Strikes. When we last left the Bad Love Gang, they were not only coming back from helping people escape from the Nazis, but they were also dealing with some of the consequences of disrupting time and bringing people to the future. Refresh our listeners as to where Meatball, the Pud, Bubble Butt, and friends were at the end of Bad Love Strikes.
Yeah, so this is really fun. So, they got back from rescuing the Holocaust victims on November 21st of 1974. And Bad Love Tigers picks up on New Year's Eve, 1975. So it's been, 5 or 6 weeks, and the entire gang is back together again at the Whitehall Project celebrating New Year's Eve. And they are just dancing the night away, and they're teasing each other. And at the stroke of midnight, they are ambushed by a Russian KGB agent named Borya Krovopuskov. And that sets in motion the entire plot for the sequel, Bad Love Tigers. The Bad Love Gang, they're faced with a dilemma after this ambush. Do they just take the Whitehall Project time machine to the authorities now and let them know what's going on? Or do they take this matter into their own hands and try to figure out where the breach in security came from with this Russian Borya Krovopuskov? So they decide to go back and talk to President Franklin Roosevelt, who commissioned the building of the Whitehall Project. And they use the Whitehall time machine, and they go back to Warm Springs, Georgia, and they meet in person with President Roosevelt at the Little White House in Warm Springs.
This is probably after Annie and Daddy Warbucks met with him, but that's a different story for a different day. I don't think that was during the war. I have with me Dr. Kevin Schewe, the author of Bad Love Tigers, the sequel to Bad Love Strikes. His Russ Crovo character is the older version of him, I suppose, and I guess he was biding his time quite a bit for this ambush surprise, wasn't he?
Oh, so you've really read the book, Chris. Yeah, so they actually happened to walk by Russ Crovo when they go back to secure the future of the White Hole Project. But when he ambushes them, he's in his mid-50s, and this is a chiseled dude. I mean, he's bad, and he, without giving away too much, basically Borya Krovo-Puskov is going to emerge as an arch villain in the Bad Love series.
Kevin, when we talked about Bad Love Strikes in the first episode of Book Spectrum, and you can find that on our page, bookspectrum.com, and of course all sorts of digital outlets like Spotify, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcast. I don't think I can list them all, Google Podcasts and more. You introduced us to the gang. Really, you and your friends, or based on you and your friends. There were two older adult influences to the group, though, figuring prominently in Bad Love Tigers. Tell our listeners a bit about the Thompsons and how they played, one, a part in the younger people's lives in the book, and, as we said, the Bad Love Gang is modeled after you and your friends. Who are Mr. and Mrs. Thompson modeled after?
Yeah, so we'll keep their names exactly as they're printed in the book. So it's Paul and Mary Thompson in the book, but Paul is better known as Waldo in Bad Love Strikes and Bad Love Tigers, and Mary, his wife, uniquely, we never gave Mary a nickname, which was the one and only time in the history of the Bad Love Gang that we didn't assign somebody a nickname. Otherwise, you can't get in the gang unless you have a nickname. And but Mary just was so incredibly sweet and kind and a peacemaker that none of us could really figure out what to call her. Maybe we would have called her Mother Teresa or something like that, in retrospect. But anyway, so they couldn't have children. So these are real people that we grew up with and were part of the gang. And they were not able to have children of their own. And what they did was they basically adopted, if you want to use that phrase, it kind of took us all in, all the kids in the Bad Love Gang in the neighborhood. And it was amazing, Chris, So this is in the late 60s and early 70s, and their door was always open to all the kids in the neighborhood. And it was a gathering place. We would watch TV there. We would watch The $6 Million Man or MASH, and we would do barbecues over there. And anyway, you could knock on their door just about any time of the day or night, and their home was open to us. And it was really a unique experience for us kids. And so they became really surrogate parents to the entire Bad Love Gang. And it was really kind of an amazing childhood to have all that. And now, flash forward all these years, I'm bringing all these memories back with this book series.
I guess they kept you all out of trouble, aside from maybe going to time machines and traveling back in time and disrupting the war effort or something like that. But other than that, you're not stealing cans of soda from the local convenience store.
Well, I would say that they tried their best to keep us out of trouble, and I can at least say that none of us ended up having any jail time. But we were quite a rambunctious group of kids, and in the books you'll see that Mary is kind of the worrier. She worries about the safety of the group, and she really prods Waldo into being more of a fatherly figure to make sure that we all come back alive from all of our adventures. And anyway,
they're the ones that are going to have to explain these things to the parents, and that's going to be tough. Well, we let them on a time machine, and they went back to help deal with Russian spies and the Chinese and fighter pilots and things like that. But one of them didn't come back. They're like, how could you let them do that? It'll be tough to explain.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to work on the excuse for that, but I think we might find a little bit of that in the third book in the series. So stay tuned for more.
You're listening to Book Spectrum. Kevin Schewe, Dr. Kevin Schewe is my guest, author of Bad Love Tigers. That's the sequel to Bad Love Strikes. You mentioned how the gang jumps back into time and warns President Roosevelt of what's going on with the Russians later on in the decades to pass. They also wind up playing a role in the American war effort. That's a lot on these young people.
Yeah, it sure is. Although, they're good. They're rambunctious kids, and they all tease each other to the nth degree. But they're very patriotic, and these are kids that came right out. I mean, they're all baby boomers. I mean, by definition, all the GIs are coming back from the war, from World War II, and they're having babies, and that's what this group is. They're a group of baby boomers, and then Waldo kind of, and Mary, they kind of bridge the gap because Waldo's actually a Korean War veteran. And so, I mean, there's a lot of history there, and that's one of the unique things about this book series, Chris, is that, and Bad Love Tigers is off to an amazing start. It's been running number one on Kindle in of all categories, children's time travel, and so it's strong historic fiction. I mean, there's a lot of history in both of these books, and I'm obsessive compulsive about being accurate whenever I write about history. So I blend that accurate history in with the science fiction of time travel, and it really works well. So this is a great book for ages really 10 to 100, and I would have read it when I was 7, but that's me. And so anyway, it's a great learning tool, I think, for younger children and teenagers.
Kevin, you add a lot more fun to this for the more conspiracy-minded as Area 51 comes into play.
That's right. So, Chris, what really is going on in Area 51? Do you know?
I tried to get in at one point, but they wouldn't let me.
Well, you're not alone. There are a lot of people that have tried to get in there. And there are, people that have spied on Area 51. But nevertheless, my series really takes this Area 51 concept on, and so my books allege that actually there was an alien spacecraft that crashed, and that it is hidden in Area 51, and that's the source of the blue exotic matter that, according to Einstein's theory of relativity, makes time travel possible. You can't travel in time. You can't create a wormhole to connect in time and space without exotic matter. And where else am I going to get it to make time travel possible but Area 51? And so when the Bad Love Gang go back to meet with President Roosevelt, he's telling them that they're in a perfect position to protect the integrity of the White Hole Project time machine. But surprisingly and shockingly, I mean, he literally shocks the group, and he tells them, I'm going to assign you to protect the future of Area 51. And so now we have a book series that the readers can tune into and really follow the truth behind Area 51.
Kevin, still some of our readers will wonder why you call the book Bad Love Tigers. There's a good reason, not just because of the Bad Love Gang, and it's not a book about Siegfried and Roy.
That's right, Chris, and glad you brought that up, because when I was a little boy, and this was why I said I probably would read Bad Love Tigers when I was 7 years old. So I had asthma, and I learned how to read at a very young age. I was in oxygen tents and got all these like steroid shots and such. They didn't have great treatment for asthma in the early 60s, but anyway, one of the very first books that I read, I mean, this is the gospel truth. One of the first books that I read was the story of the Flying Tigers and General Claire Chennault in China in World War II. I mean, these were, when the group started, when Chennault started the Flying Tigers, they were all volunteers. I mean, these are guys, they were all military. They were, Air Force, Army, and Marine and Navy aviators, but he pulled 100 pilots together and 200 ground crew, and he took them to China, and they formed what was called the AVG Flying Tigers, and that stood for the All Volunteer Group. And those guys were the first to fight against the Japanese Air Force after the bombing of World War II. So they actually protected the city of Kunming, China, at the end of December of 41, right after Pearl Harbor was bombed. There was a Time article magazine about Blood for the Tigers, and it just took off in America, the story of the Flying Tigers, and these guys were fearless, and it was a great story. It's one of the greatest adventure stories of World War II, the AVG Flying Tigers. It's just one of those stories buried in the history of World War II, one of the most exciting things ever. And so there's a connection between Roosevelt and General Claire Chennault, and there's something that happens in China with a UFO at that very time in June of 1942, and so Roosevelt assigns the Bad Love Gang. He gives them a letter, and he tells them you have to use the white hole, and you have to go back in time and give this letter to General Claire Chennault. And that moves us towards the end of the book and the grand finale. But that's why the book is called Bad Love Tigers, because of the Flying Tigers.
Dr. Kevin Schewe is with me on Book Spectrum. I'm your host, Chris Cordani. The book, as we just said, Bad Love Tigers. It's the sequel to Bad Love Strikes. Kevin, another thing that adds to this whole bit of suspense and what we might see down the road with sequels to come is I'm not sure the Chinese, Germans, and soon the Russians would very much appreciate knowing they were outwitted by people named Meatball, the Pud, and Bubble Butt.
Exactly. Well, these kids, they're all 15 to 18 years old. So they're at that transition point between being a kid and being an adult. And so the book series really, Chris, is a coming of age story about this group of friends that grew up after, in classic suburbia, World War II. After the war was over, the baby boomers in the late 60s and early 70s, and they all had nicknames for each other. And the nickname, we assigned the nicknames in brutal fashion. I mean, no one was nobody was spared, and it's kind of fun when you think about it. I mean, really, we just didn't even we had no concept of being politically correct in the late 60s and the early 70s. And so, everybody, the Pud, for example, what a great guy in the book. I mean, he solves a lot of problems. He's very, very detail oriented, but basically he got his nickname because he was average in every sporting event when we were kids and got the awards for attendance. So we nicknamed him the Pud. And I just don't know that would be politically correct in today's world.
You wouldn't be allowed to say it in school, at least. I'm pretty sure of that. I'm not sure if you were allowed back then either, but I guess that's a different story for a different day. The narrator, the character based on you, Bubble Butt, if I'm correct.
That's right.
That's right. So you were Bubble Butt, so you kept yours. Did get to meet his senior citizen self. I don't want to give up too much on that, but had that happened to you in real life, what might the senior you want to tell the younger you?
Well, I really do. When I trained I'm going to just kind of go off on a tangent for a second, but when I trained in radiation oncology, I trained at the Medical College of Wisconsin in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which used to be Marquette Medical School, but I trained under a guy named Dr. Jim Cox, who has passed away last year, but he was an amazing man and teacher. And this is a quote from Dr. Cox that I haven't used in my books yet, but he said to us as we were learning how to take care of cancer patients, he says, we all learn more from our mistakes than we do from our successes. All success does is cultivate pride, and pride is no great virtue to cultivate anyway. And so, the whole thing about going through life, Chris, and I have to laugh about it because I'm real comfortable in my own skin nowadays that I'm in my early 60s, and I tell people that I've probably made about every mistake that a guy can make, and it's a shame that you can't make all those mistakes and then go back and be young again. And I hope you know what I mean, because if you're, if you haven't gone through a few major crises in your life by the time you're 50 years old, then you must be living in some kind of a bubble. And so I wanted to bring the older me back to talk to the younger me to give some wisdom, based on real experience. And in general, all of that experience is that you've lived long enough to make enough mistakes that you're actually wise. And that's what you see at the end of this book when you get the 62-year-old me talking to the 16, almost 17-year-old me.
On the other hand, getting back to the book, we have to respect your gang's motto, live dangerously, have fun, and don't die.
Wouldn't you like to live by that motto? I mean...
The last part especially.
Exactly. There's a Woody Allen quote where he says, I'm not afraid to die. I just don't want to be there when it happens.
Kevin Schewe, Dr. Kevin Schewe is with me on Book Spectrum. His book, Bad Love Tigers, the sequel to Bad Love Strikes. Once again, you can find that on our website, Book Spectrum, as well. Again, for our listeners, I have referred to you as Dr. Kevin Schewe. You're an oncologist by trade, and you said that before. This is your second book. What real-life experiences or wisdom do you take from your work as an oncologist to writing about the Bad Love universe?
I really do love that question, Chris, because it's hope. When you're dealing with cancer, a lot of times you're able to walk into the room and you're visiting with a patient and all the tests are normal and they come back clean, and you tell the patient that they're, either cured or that they're in a continuous remission. But not a day goes by in my clinic that I have to walk in the door and tell somebody that their cancer has recurred or that their cancer has spread to another part of the body. And, typically that's devastating news. And so how do you give that news in a way where you can actually walk back out of that room with hope? And the way to do that is you're honest. You give the news as it is true and as it occurred. But then you look the patient in the eye and you say, but this is what we're going to do about it. we've got this situation where the cancer has spread, but this is how we're going to deal with it. And so a common thread that runs through the Bad Love series is that hope springs eternal. And there's an awful lot of bad situations in the world, but if you look, you can always find hope. And so that's, I think, the biggest lesson I've learned in all my years as a cancer doctor. And I try to really show that in this book series. And as you'll see, the Bad Love Gang, even in the midst of terror and danger, they find something to say to each other that kind of, they tease each other, and they even laugh in the midst of terror or danger because of things that they say. And so there's a proverb. It says, "A joyful heart is good medicine, but a broken spirit dries up bones." And I take that to mean a good belly laugh stimulates your immune system. And so I have laughter and joy and hope in the midst of chaos and terror in my books, and that will be a common thread through everything that I write.
Another common thread from your past book to this one, and I'm guessing the third one and those beyond, you have a suggested playlist that accompanies each of these books.
Oh, that's right. So really, as you're reading the beginning of Bad Love Tigers, there's little descriptions of each of the Bad Love Gang, and as you read Bubble Butts or BB's description, he has a music brain, and that is just the gospel truth. I mean, I grew up with a 45 RPM jukebox in the basement of our home, and my two older sisters were incredibly popular kids, and so there was always music going in our home. It was there all the time, and my parents would put on, Sinatra or Dean Martin or somebody like that at night when they would come home from work. But anyway, I grew up loving music, and honestly, Chris, I'm one of those guys now that kind of subscribes to the theory that the best music has already been recorded, and
it kind of makes sense.
And so I really bring the music from the 60s and the 70s into the books, and it's so much fun because it actually helps me write. I mean, I've already, the next book beyond or after Bad Love Tigers is called Bad Love Beyond. I've already started writing Bad Love Beyond, and there's 3 songs on the soundtrack already. And I listen to the music while I write, and it just makes it seem so much more real to me. So I really urge the readers to listen to those songs as they're called out in the books. It makes it more like it makes it more like you're watching a movie rather than reading a book. And I don't know that I've seen any other books that have soundtracks like the Bad Love series.
The only ones I could think of are a couple of the Stephen King ones. Kevin, your first book, Bad Love Strikes, was dedicated to your sister Kathy, who remains in remission from her breast cancer, according to your prologue. The second novel, this one, Bad Love Tigers, is dedicated to another sister, Denise Borg. She's a sci-fi and spy show fan as well.
That's right. Yeah, so Kathy is, I'm just so incredibly happy to tell you and the audience that Kathy is still in a complete remission from her stage 3 triple-negative breast cancer. It was a really virulent bad cancer, and she's in a complete remission and has stayed there. It's now coming up on 3 years. And so she's the oldest child, and then the second child in the family is my sister, Denise Borg. And although Denise has not faced cancer, she's had an incredibly interesting life. She's been a math teacher. I think one of the the coolest things that she did the last 10 years or so before she retired. She worked for a nonprofit that helped homeless people get back up on their feet again. And so Denise, literally, she has a heart of gold. And she's one of these people that has invested her life and her journey going through this life with helping other people. And that's her MO, and she's sticking to it. So Denise and I were buddies growing up, and we were closer in age than Kathy and I, and so Denise and I played games together. We played Monopoly and Risk, and we played card games, like Gin Rummy, and we played this one called War, and there was a lot of competition on the games. But the funniest thing was in the game of Risk, I just kept winning and winning and winning at Risk, and it drove her crazy. And one night, I think I was actually in my residency in Milwaukee, and she and her husband came to visit, and we played Risk, and she won.
Excellent.
And she got on the phone at like midnight to call my mom and dad and my other sister to tell them that she won at Risk. And it just made all of us, laugh so hard. But anyway, Denise and I would she was a science fiction fan and really a spy action fan. She really loved, for example, Man from U.N.C.L.E. And so we would kind of compete. I would want to watch Lost in Space. She would want to watch Man from U.N.C.L.E. And we kind of met in the middle. We both liked Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. This gives away our age, Chris. But it was a great. We have a great relationship and have great memories from growing up together.
Dr. Kevin Schewe, thank you very much once again for being with us on Book Spectrum. Your website once again?
It's kevinschewe.com. So it's KevinSchewe.com. And all the Bad Love Tigers information is up there now. You can click the Buy Now function, and it'll take you to Kindle or the paperback or hardcover through Amazon or through Barnes & Noble. It's just an easy click, and you can go to any of those websites through my website to purchase Bad Love Tigers or Bad Love Strikes.
You can also find a link to Kevin's page on our website, bookspectrum.com. The book, Bad Love Tigers, a sequel to Bad Love Strikes. It's out now and available on digital outlets. Links to pick up the book or a Kindle version and find out more about Kevin are on our website once again, bookspectrum.com. I'm Chris Cordani. Thank you for listening to Book Spectrum.